the most successful Christian evangelist since St. Paul. It's difficult to gauge the enormity of the impact made by the man who died today at age 99. In 2007, Graham's organization estimated they had preached the gospel to more than 215 million people in more than 185 countries and territories over 60 years. And that doesn't include the hundreds of millions more he reached through television, through video, and film.
Religion without a personal encounter with Jesus Christ will not save the soul, and it will not bring the peace that your soul longs for.
I know that God has sent me out as a warrior on the 5 continents to preach the gospel, and I must continue until he gives the signal that I'm to stop.
If you remember nothing that I say tonight, except one thing I want you to remember: God loves you.
Joining us now to discuss Graham's legacy is an absolute all-star panel of religious leaders in Lake Forest, California. Pastor Rick Warren of the Saddleback Church, in Virginia Beach, Dr. Pat Robertson from the Christian Broadcasting Network, and in Fort Myers, Florida, Tullian Chavajan, who is the grandson of Reverend Graham. Gentlemen, it's great to see all of you on this sad night, but a wonderful night to reflect on an amazing man. And Rick Warren, I'd like to start with you because I know that Reverend Graham was a mentor to you. You've known him for years. Tell us about him, the man, and the influence on you personally.
Well, as you said, Laura, Billy Graham was the most influential Christian of the 20th century. Nobody comes close to speaking in history to 200 million people face to face. And only Pope John Paul II and Mother Teresa would be as widely known around the world as Billy was. Growing up in a Baptist home, Billy Graham was our Pope. And I read my first Billy Graham book, Peace with God, I think when I was in the 6th grade. At 17, I heard him for the first time and was thrilled at the Oakland Crusade. And at 20, I met him person to person at the LA Crusade and began a 40-year relationship where he mentored me over the last 40 years.
Did he get you through the good times and the bad? Did you seek counsel from him, Reverend Warren, when you needed it most?
Well, one of the greatest things about Billy that people don't know is that he was an encourager to the next generation. And I've actually tried to learn from him on that. A lot of stuff that he taught me, I've done with the next generation myself. And one of them was he provided platforms for younger people. I remember when I was in college, I wrote my first book on how to study the Bible, methods. And I wasn't a very confident writer at all. But Billy Graham believed in me, and somehow he got a copy of a book that I had self-published. He called me in the mid-'80s and said, Rick, I'm bringing 13,000 evangelists to Amsterdam for 10 days of training, and I want you to come and train them and teach them how to study the Bible. I'm in my 20s.
Wow.
And he says, I bought a copy of your book in 17 languages, and I want you to come teach them. That's how much he believed in young people. He's helped me ever since, and through coaching, through, doing the inauguration prayer for President Bush and then for President Obama. The advice he gave me behind the scenes was invaluable.
Wow. Reverend Robertson, I need to hear from you on this because you have been friends with Reverend Graham for many decades. He spoke so highly of you over the years, and he said this was back in 2002, he talked about death, something we all face. And I want to play it for you. Let's listen.
I remember one night in the hospital, 2 nights in the hospital, I thought I was dying. And my whole life came before me. I said, oh Lord, I'm a sinner. I still need your forgiveness. I still need the cross. And I asked the Lord to give me peace in my heart, and he did, a wonderful peace that hasn't left me till this day, and that's been nearly 2 years ago.
Reverend Robertson, your comment on that. He emanated that sense of peace and a resolute clarity.
One of the things that was so striking about Billy Graham, and we were friends. I was head of the college follow-up at his New York crusade in '57. So we go back a long time.
Wow.
And he is a man that was so humble. That statement was so humble. I need God's forgiveness. He always talked about the cross. He never took authority for himself. He was the friend of presidents, one after the other. He led people to the Lord by the hundreds of thousands. He was acclaimed, man of the year, time and time again. Always humility. Always, I've got to seek the cross of Jesus. He pointed people to Jesus and away from himself. That's the thing that struck to me. And I was with him at the fall of the Berlin Wall. I mean, he came to dedicate this building I'm in right now. He's a dear, dear friend for many years, but always humble. Never, ever did he take any airs to himself that he was some kind of a hotshot. And he is the preeminent evangelical in the world. And if we've got 50 million evangelicals in America, he was number one. Everybody looked at him. Everybody admired him. And if we wanted to get something done, we said, let's get Billy to head it up, and things began to get done.
Jillian, your grandfather, you said that you didn't really realize until you were, a little bit older, just how important he was because of what Rick and Pat just said, his deep sense of humility, which was so attractive. And so humility is powerful. And I thought it was so powerful in him.
Yeah, it was. And I think as one of his grandsons, we got to see perspective. We got to see him in ways that no one else got to see him. And I can tell you that the humility that the public saw, we saw in private. I mean, he is genuinely the most humble person I have ever met in my life. And I remember asking him one time, Daddy Bill, that's what we called him, Daddy Bill. And I said, Daddy Bill, how in the world have you remained so humble in light of all of your accomplishments and in light of all of the adulation and praise that you receive? And he looked at me kind of puzzled. He didn't like the fact that I even said he was humble because he did not think he was humble at all. But he said, it's hard to be proud when you begin each day with God. When you begin each day with God, you realize that God is big and I am small. God is God and I am not. So I think it was, even for us family members, it was really his humility that left the most deepest impression on all of us. But it was also his message. I think, Laura, one of the things that separates him from so many different religious leaders, even Christian leaders, is the idea that he preached so passionately, the idea that the essence, the foundation of Christianity is not what we do for God, it's what God in Christ has done for us. And I think that is a huge, huge thing to say, that it was all about Christ's finished work on our behalf, that we don't have to add to what God has already done for us, that God has already granted us his approval and his acceptance and his love because of what Jesus has done for us. And so, the man, of course, is just, speaks volumes, his humility, his faithfulness, his devotion. He was a family man. He was keenly devoted to his family. But then his message, I think, stands out.
Jillian, I have kind of an odd question. Was he funny? Did he have I know Pat will know this, but did he have a sense of humor? Because he seems like most of the time so serious, and he's so black. He's black and white. It's like but I love that it was so powerful. But was he funny? Did he goof around?
Well, yeah, I think the funniest part about Daddy Bill is that he didn't realize he was funny. That's the funny thing, is that I think we spent most of our time laughing at him rather than laughing with him.
Well, that
because he was he was sort of unconsciously humorous, but he had a remarkable sense of humor. And here's one other thing too. He took God very seriously, but he never ever took himself too seriously. And I think that gave him a humanness that was very, very relatable to all of us.
Rick, on today's world, it's a broken world. It's always been broken, but lately we really seem more than I remember to be at each other's throats. It's hard to have civil conversations with people about politics. People take things out of context. People who are friends are not talking because of politics. What would Reverend Graham say to that? Because he stayed away from politics. He was friends with everybody. But what would he say about the tone and the rancor today, especially?
Well, one of the hallmarks of Billy was not just the humility that Tully and Pat mentioned, but it was his integrity also. He was spotless after 60 years. And third would be he was a uniter. He was a builder, a bridge builder. People forget that in the 50s and in the 60s, Billy Graham insisted that all of his campaigns and crusades in the South be integrated. And for many of those southern cities, they were the first publicly integrated events in those cities when Billy Graham came to town. And he said, I'm not coming unless they're integrated. Wow. Not only were they integrated ethnically and skin color, but they were also integrated with all of the different traditions of Christianity. He said, everybody's got to be at the table. And he put Catholics and Calvinists on the stage, and he put Protestants and Pentecostals, and he put, charismatics and evangelicals and fundamentals, and they were all there. And some people got mad at that, but he said, I'm not coming unless there's a unity. And of course, in politics, one of the things he taught me was that you've got to shepherd everybody, that you have friends who are Republicans, friends who are Democrats, and you pastor them all. You don't get co-opted by any particular partisan group, because he has to be above the fray. And that's why he did, for instance, pray and counsel and share with both sides of the aisle.
We're out of time, unfortunately. But we could do an hour on this. I want to have Pat and Rick and Chilean back on radio. I hope as soon as possible to discuss this legacy. We could do an hour on it. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. And back in the world of politics,